Want to bet? You can do it at Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook. Football is back. Baseball playoffs just on the horizon as well. And of course, hockey season just around the corner. You can bet pregame, live and play, or on one of our many prop bets. Made for Canadians by Canadians, Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN is the website to visit. Just going to repeat that again for everybody. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. Ontario only, 19 and over. Please play responsibly. The dossier for Rasmus Sandin. You're based in Toronto. A lot of people are going to ask you about Rasmus Sandin. We have to get to this situation. Do you have any updates on that?
The latest update as of Monday morning is that the sides are talking, which is, I think, encouraging. It's kind of a strange contract, right? I mean, we can get into Jason Robertson or maybe some of the other situations where there actually is a huge range of what that deal might look like depending on the length and all that. I think with the Rasmus Sandin case, it's almost assuredly going to be a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal he signs in Toronto. It'd be a surprise to me anyway if he signed anything other than for those term lengths. And he's played approximately 80 NHL games career. So I mean, there's not a huge variance between what he's asking and what the Leafs are offering. But there's still enough of a gap there that he's back in Sweden as we're recording this, skating on his own with some coaches on the ice, but there's no NHL players left to be skating with for him there. Everyone's come back to their NHL cities that he would have worked out with through the summer. And training camp opens with medicals on Wednesday and on ice sessions on Thursday, and it's appearing less and less likely, I suppose, that he'll be there. Although keep in mind, often these deals get done right at that moment, and then the player flies and maybe only misses a day or two. That's what happened with Mitch Marner, for example. That's what happened with David Pastrnak back on his second NHL contract. I think he missed a day of Bruins training camp, but signed his deal right as it was opening and ended up joining the team pretty early on. And this would be an important training camp for Sandin because there's been some questions a little bit about sort of maybe not his work ethic, but his conditioning from Sheldon Keefe. He's kind of brought that up in the past. I think young players don't always put on muscle the way you'd want. And so I do think that him getting in and having a strong camp could benefit him in terms of being ready for the season. But, the business side has to get done first. And, the other thing, too, is I've heard and haven't been able to confirm 100%, but there's apparently a couple Leafs players that are injured, too, that won't be ready to start the season. And that could impact his situation, too. I mean, certainly from a cap perspective, I think it might make things a little bit easier for the Leafs if they have to start with players on long-term injured reserve. When you go to Puckpedia or Cap Friendly and look at their contract picture, I think some people are scratching their heads about how they can get under the cap. I think that will be one way to facilitate it. But there's a lot of different dynamics at play. And I think the fact that the sides are talking, should point us towards a resolution being reached. But, the last I'd heard, the Leafs were sticking pretty hard on a 1-year offer at his qualifying offer number, which is, somewhere in the 800,000s. That they were willing to do a 2-year deal at the same deal that Timothy Liljegren signed at $1.4 million times 2. I'd heard that Sandin's camp countered with a 1-year offer at 1.4, somewhere in that neighborhood anyway. And so, look, they're a couple $100,000 apart. That there should be a solution here, but it hasn't yet manifested itself.
Wow, thank you for the insight on the back and forth with the counter offers. That's pretty revealing, actually. Now that I think about it.
Well, I think it's natural. And look,
well, yeah.
The thing that's happened here is, Mikey Anderson signed a deal in LA at 1 year, $1 million. Maybe you might say that's a reasonable comparison for Sandin. A player, again, has established himself, played a lot of minutes in LA last year, but hasn't done it year after year after year. He's still a young guy. I mean, maybe that's the solution if the Sandin, ends up wanting a 1-year deal. But the point is they're within range. It's not. I think like if you look at the Jason Robertson situation with the Dallas Stars, if he does a 3-year deal or a 7 or 8-year deal, there's a huge variance in what that might look like. I think, with the seasons he's had, he's coming off a 40-goal year. I mean, bonus payments and those types of things could come into play a little bit more. Sandin's still at the point where he's establishing himself, whereas I think there's an argument to be made based on the 2 seasons, full years that Jason Robertson had as an NHL player that he's already there. And so it becomes down to what the team can afford. Do they want to lock him up long-term, or does a bridge deal make the most sense? I think when you get in that situation, there's more dynamics at the bargaining table. Whereas this one, where I do believe it's going to be a short-term deal. Someone's going to have to move, and the truth is the team doesn't have to move. The team can just say, hey, this is the offer, take it or leave it. And then the player says, okay, well, I'm not taking it. And training camp starts and different pressures come in. Obviously, reporters will be talking about this a lot more into this next week if he remains unsigned. And so that's kind of where we're at. But I don't see a reason it shouldn't get done. Honestly, I think it's in the team and the players' mutual interest to have him be ready for the season to play to play a more meaningful part of the Leafs next year. But remains to be seen. They gotta get it done first.
You mentioned Jason Robertson. Any updates on his situation in Dallas?
Well, he's going to make a lot of money.
Yes.
I think if you're looking at a 3-year term for him, probably something above what Elias Pettersson signed in Vancouver, which is north of $7 million. I think if he gets into a 6 or 7 or 8-year deal, he's getting into the sort of Mikko Rantanen and Mitch Marner territory. Somewhere between $9.5 and $11 million. Texas is a tax-free state. There's some incentives there maybe for him not to push for exactly the Mitch Marner deal, but something in that range, I think is fair. There's just been very few players. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to comparables, right? And he's played over 100 NHL games. He's just a hair under a point per game over those games. He's coming off a season where he was better than a point per game player. He scored 41 goals in not quite a full 82-game season. He missed some time. And there's very few guys other than, say, a Matthews or a McDavid back when that had those kind of platform seasons entering their second NHL contract. And so, I think that there's a choice for the team to be made, that there's some cap considerations. Ideally, you probably want to pay him now and just lock him in for the meat of his career. Because if you did sign a long-term deal, that's you'd be guaranteeing yourself pretty assuredly his best seasons, but it's going to come at a pretty high cost. And I know Tom Ghilardi, the Stars owner, was on a podcast at some point over the summer, and I saw the clip bouncing around. Like he doesn't like the idea of having to pay someone so young in their career. But if you look at the league-wide trend, I don't see how they get around that. And Dallas is a team that needs offense too. I mean, there's a different pressure point here, even than the Sandin case. I mean, this is a absolutely key member of their team who I think it would be hard for the Stars to play without. And so, I think that they're under a little bit more heat to bring him in. It's not to diminish Sandin's role with the Leafs, but they have Morgan Riley and Jake Muzzin and Mark Giordano signed that can play the left side of their blue line. They have some comfort there. I think if for some reason they aren't able to get Sandin signed, that they can move forward. But to me, Dallas needs this player signed, and it's kind of incumbent upon them to find the solution.